So today is a sad day. I'm finally trading in my Sony A7III, my workhorse for the last 3 years, and I'm getting the new Sony A7IV at £2,400. Am I doing the right thing? Let's find out. This is Wex Photo Video in East London.
Hey.
You alright?
Yeah, how are you?
I'm good.
So I spoke to you, right?
Yeah.
And there she is. And this is all my trade-in gear, an old Fujifilm, my A7III, and a Canon battery grip. So that's it, the trade is done. I got £1,100 for my old camera, which I'm pretty pleased about, and it's time to test this beauty out and see if I made the right decision. So I've been shooting with my new Sony A7IV now for a couple of weeks, and oh boy, this thing is good. So very good. And oh, incidentally, this is what I'm currently using to shoot this talking head shot with. Now, there are two other cameras worth mentioning in this video besides the A7III and 4, and that is the Sony A7S3 and the flagship A1, which are £3,800 and £6,500 respectively. Now, why is this worth mentioning? Well, the A7IV is as good as the A1 in certain situations and better than the A7S3 in others. Let me explain. It uses the same Bionz XR processor as the two more expensive cameras do, which means improved real-time autofocus tracking for eye and face detect both in humans and animals, and this is shooting in photo and video capture as well. The A7IV also uses the same autofocus system as the two more expensive cameras, so if you're moving up from the A7III, this is going to be a significant upgrade for you. The speed of the autofocus tracking feature will blow your mind. Moving between eye and face detect and re-establishing connection is just ridiculous. And when you combine the massive new buffer size on this camera with the new CF Express card slot, you're going to get some insane read and write speeds on this camera of 700 and 800 megabits per second. So if you're shooting fast continuous burst mode in RAW, you're never going to fill up your buffer. More things to compare with the A7S III and the A1 is the dynamic range, as good as the A1 and in some respects better than the A7S III, and a slight improvement over its predecessor, the A7 III, which already had game-changing dynamic range when it was released about 4 or 5 years ago. So I've taken an exposure of Tower Bridge at f5.6. Now I'm going to deliberately underexpose the scene by 2 stops to see how the A7 IV handles image recovery in Lightroom. This is the properly exposed image, as you can see from the histogram, and this is the 2-stop underexposed image. Now let's see what happens if we increase the exposure by exactly 2 stops. The A7IV seems to be able to handle 2 stops pretty easily, and if we zoom in to pixel peep at the detail and compare this to the original, there is only minimal noise. And here's a 3-stop underexposed image, increased by 3 stops, and with a hint of noise reduction and some basic editing, we now have a completely usable image, incredible dynamic range performance. So let's talk about the physical improvements of this camera over the A7 III. First off, notably, is the much bigger battery hand grip. When I moved over from the Canon 5D Mark III to the Sony system, one of the major drawbacks was the ergonomics. The camera just felt too small in the hand and there was nowhere for your pinky finger to sit. The first thing I did was go out and buy a small rig Arca base plate to make the camera physically bigger. With the A7 IV, you don't have to do that. It just feels more substantial in the hand, and it houses the new FZ100 battery, which gives you over 2 hours of video record time at 4K 30 frames per second. Secondly is the fully articulating screen. This is a big reason to upgrade from the Sony A7 III. So many times did I find myself lying on the floor to reach the shooting angle and see the screen. It's particularly useful for shooting low vertical shots to the ground. And of course, the flip out screen now opens this camera up to the world of vlogging, which is another great reason I wanted to get my hands on the A7 IV. So other physical additions to this camera are on the top panel. We now have a multifunction dial in place of the exposure compensation wheel on the A7 III. This can be programmed to stay as exposure compensation, or we can now set this to ISO, white balance, or even tone color settings. I personally love this new feature because I have this set to ISO, so I can change that feature on the fly, and it's right next door to my shutter dial, so I have full control over my exposure in manual mode. The dial also has a locking feature on the top here, so you don't accidentally change your settings by mistake. Really useful. And also the shutter dial is really nice and firm now compared to the A7 III, so you're probably not going to change your settings on that by mistake either. You'll notice another addition to the mode dial, which is this dedicated selector lever for moving between photo, video and S&Q settings. Really useful if you're a multimedia shooter like me who needs to move quickly between photo and video. And if you like to set your custom buttons and your memory recall buttons on the mode dial, you now have essentially 9 recalls, 3 for each workspace. One more brilliant addition to the A7 IV is the ability to close the shutter when powering down. This is particularly useful if you're changing lenses out and about and stopping dust from getting on your sensor. I hate dust. Thank you, Sony. You will get messages about exposing the shutter to sunlight or touching the shutter, so keep your grubby fingers off. And of course, we've already mentioned the addition of the CF Express card slot, which doubles as an SD card slot. These cards are really expensive, by the way. An 80GB card will set you back around £200. So just bear that in mind when you're making a trade or a purchase. They are lightning fast though, and you'll probably need one if you're shooting 4K 60 frames per second. I do expect these prices will drop over time as new tech seems to do. Oh, and you can record photo and video to both card slots simultaneously. We now have a better electronic viewfinder and screen than the A7 III, which you would expect after 3 or 4 years. And my favourite, the doors to the HDMI and USB slots have proper hinges now, not those ridiculous flimsy covers that just got in the way. Right, let's get to the business end of the new features on this camera. 33 megapixel sensor, that's 9 megas more than its predecessor, which doesn't sound a lot when you compare this to the 61 megapixels you get on the A7R IV, but it's all about the delivery of the new color science and the image detail of this sensor, which makes you think, are all those 61 megapixels required? Do people actually print off their images that big? Probably not. 33 megapixels is an absolute sweet spot for me. Just enough increase to play around with image cropping without losing quality, but not too much where your computer has a meltdown trying to process them. If you're a stills photographer, then you're getting an absolutely phenomenal camera here. But know this, you'll also get a brilliant video camera. When I bought my first A7 III, I barely used the video functions on that camera, but then I became a fully fledged YouTuber and realized, hey, I've got a pretty good video camera here. Well, on the A7 IV, you're getting a fantastic video camera. 4K 30 frames per second using the entire sensor, so no crop. 4K 60 frames per second with a slight crop, and both with 10-bit color. Not only do you have the 5-axis in-body stabilization, you also have the additional active stabilization, which is supposed to make everything look like it's shot with a gimbal. Well, almost. I'll let you decide. This is without the stabilization, so no crop. And this is with the stabilization, so there is a slight crop but a slight improvement, and this is really useful for YouTubers, vloggers and people with wide angle lenses. And definitely not as smooth as the hyper smooth feature on the GoPro. One thing the A7S III does have over the A7 IV is much less rolling shutter. I would say that this camera is not great for on the move guerrilla style shooting. Fast movements will really show up the rolling shutter on this camera, but smooth cinematic gimbal and tripod shots, this camera really shines. There is an additional new picture profile on this camera called S Cinetone, which offers lovely skin tones straight out of the box and more contrast than say your HLG profile. So if you're not that bothered about color grading or don't have time, then this is your best bet for delivering hassle-free great footage to your clients. The new color science on this camera will give you richer skin tones overall, and this includes photo and video capture. So another great reason to upgrade from the A7 III. When I moved over from the Canon 5D Mark III, there was a noticeable shift in skin tones. The A7 III had more greens as opposed to Canon's more magenta. The A7 IV sits somewhere in the middle where it should be, so headshot photographers, rejoice. There is a very good second native ISO range on this camera between 3200 and 6400, so if you're shooting in low light, you will see better performance out of this camera, and I'm told even better than the A7S III, although I don't have this camera to test. I'm currently shooting on ISO 5000. Another new feature on this camera is called focus mapping, which looks a little distracting, I have to say, but quite useful if you're composing a shot and need to know what's in sharp focus and what isn't. I still think focus peaking is more useful, but some might find this quite favorable. So the big question, was it worth the trade-in for the A7 III? Abso-flippin-lutely. Considering I got almost £1,100 back in credit, plus the ton of new features you get with this camera and the 33 megapixel sensor, I'd buy 2 of these if I could. So anyway, I hope this little video was helpful. If you're considering buying an A7 IV, you won't be disappointed. Give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed for more juicy content, and I'll catch up with you next time.